Robert Ridgman was one of my very close friends throughout high school. He had that bit of an Elvis look to him, and he was a good guy to hang around with if we wanted to pick up girls.
Bob Ridgman, he was quite a character. Wore the jeans on the hips, you know. In the 60s, it was quite the style then.
Mary Ann came to our school, I believe, in the 7th or 8th grade from another school. I think it might have been a religious school. I remember dancing with her in 8th grade. Most of my memories seem about the 8th grade. She was kind of a quiet gal, but again, she seemed to have a pretty good depth of what was going on as far as the rest of the students and so forth. Gerald Hines. Jerry always had something kind of funny and mystical going on with him. He'd be looking at somebody and telling them something with a little grin. You'd think he knew a lot more about what he was saying or what that person was saying than he was letting on. Kind of an endearing characteristic of Jerry's.
Eileen was a good friend of mine. She stopped by here just a few months ago. She always says every time I go by I'm going to stop in, and she finally stopped in. We had a nice visit. Her mom was the head cook at the high school.
Elaine was also one of the top academic performers, and she told me later that her goal in life was to take over my position as number 3, and I think it was like 1/100 of a point difference or something like that. Close enough so that it was close enough, I guess. Nice family, the Martin family. Donald was, his grin in his face says a lot about his personality. He'd wait a little bit to see how things are going, but then he'd join in the mainstream and have a good time with whatever was going on. Rita Card was a very attractive young lady. She was someone I remember in the 7th grade as being kind of in the background, and then I think the 8th grade she just seemed to blossom. She and Dick Neely spent most of the time together. She would date one other guy a little bit, but she and Dick Neely ended up getting married. And Karen Seiferlein. Karen and I also went to the same church, so I knew her before school. Quiet person, but a lot of depth to her thinking. And she seemed to have a real ability to observe, and if not participate, she certainly knew what was going on and would contribute if asked.
Karen Seiferlein, I went to college with her out in Kansas, so she was pretty studious. She wanted to be a teacher. She was, like I say, studious, smart.
Jimmy Luckman was kind of a quiet but devilish type guy. He was always up for doing something that was a little bit on the risky, wild side. Richard Neely, he has that quiet look about him, but he wasn't real quiet. He was definitely up for little pranks, trying new things out. I kind of envied him. He had a 57 Chevy, and this would have been probably 59. You know, I was struggling by with a 51 Mercury. But he had a relatively modern car, nice. Had some names painted on the back fender, which was the thing to do at the time. Gail Williams, attractive young lady. She was a pretty perceptive person. You always had the idea that she knew a lot what was going on, but just kind of waiting to see how things are going to turn out before she committed herself to one side or the other. But had a lot of depth to her.
Henry, he was a very nice young man. He very studious. Actually, we hung around together, him and Jim Camley and Leslie and myself.
Henry Bardecki, he was quiet, but there seemed to be some depth to his quietness. You always had the feeling he knew more what was going on than he was letting on. Clarence, none of those quiet guys, but again, he certainly aware what was going on, and if you needed something, some help again, why, if you asked Clarence to do it, he'd help you, and you could depend on Clarence. James Camley, as I mentioned, he and John Hornick and myself were usually amongst the top academic folks, and a lot, I guess, competition going on, although I didn't think of it as a competition at the time. But Jim and I would also have conversations about who did what on what test and why we did this and so forth. So he later became a teacher, to my knowledge. Mary was fun-loving, saw Mary for the first time in, I believe, the 7th grade, so we were in class all those years together. She would enjoy in serious conversations, but on the surface she seemed to be more giddy and a lot of laughing and smiling. But she would engage in serious conversations if the occasion arose.
Mary Patty was very nice in school. She was funny. She always kept you laughing. Yeah, she was fun.
Willie Calhoun. He, along with Clifton Akers and someone we'll get to later, were part of the Three Musketeers. They hung out a lot together. They were on the basketball team. When the score was kind of lopsided, they put the Three Musketeers in, and there's just a fun group of guys to watch. They really had fun playing basketball, and I always enjoyed talking to Willie about what was going on. He always had a good, well thought out opinion. Rita Moore was a cute little girl. She was quiet, but she wouldn't take any guff. She certainly stood up for her rights. Good friend, good person to talk to, down to earth. Ingela Erickson. Ingela was a very pretty young lady. She had what I call a quiet, outgoing personality. I often thought that maybe we should have dated, but I guess I never got up enough nerve to ask her.
Bill Schilling, he was another sports athlete. Most all the guys were, yeah, he was a fun guy too, outgoing.
Bill and I hung out quite a bit along with Robert. Bill had a '56 Chevy, very nice car. His father actually was the minister at the church, and Bill seemed to overcompensate for that by trying to get us all, himself included, in as much trouble as he could every day, every night. But we did have a lot of good times together. Larry Cornell. Larry was probably the quietest guy in the class, always wore a black leather motorcycle jacket, kind of reclusive, although if you engaged in a conversation, he was aware of what was going on and who was doing what. Teresa Chavez, I sat next to her in 8th grade math, was secretly pretty enamored with her. A real gentle young lady, but I did enjoy spending time with her in groups and so forth. Met Jerry. He was mature beyond most of us as far as how he conducted himself. He would do things and try new things out, but he wouldn't do anything that would be endangerment or might get us in trouble. A good guy to hang around with, and in fact, he's one of my good friends today.
Jerry Rinke, he was another sports athlete. All the guys, I think, were into sports. I don't know if he was that studious, but he was a lot of fun. A lot of funny guy.
Thomas would observe things and then put together a few things going on, a few interactions in the group, and then make a comment when you thought about it was either funny or pretty good understanding of what was going on. So wasn't what you'd call a boisterous fellow, but he certainly was perceptive of his fellow classmates. Elizabeth Kachila, we always called her Betty. She married a good friend of my brother's, Pete Matthews, and very lively young lady. Clifton Akers. He was fun-loving, friendly, with a little bit of a devilish act to some of his thoughts and words. Nice guy to hang around with.
Bob Schindler, he was a nice kid, very nice, and he has since passed. But in school, he was hilarious. He was a comedian. He was a lot of fun. Real nice guy.
Robert was not quiet. He was fun-loving. Just the type of guy, when he walked in a room, everyone else kind of lit up because you knew he was going to say or do something and get us going in a good mood. And I'm sure Robert had some bad days, but you never saw it in high school. He was always on the upbeat, and let's make some fun of the situation and get on with life. Gerald Murray, again, I'm saying a lot of these guys are quiet. Maybe it's because I was loud, I don't know. But again, Jerry was aware of what was going on. He would join in conversations, did initiate a lot of them, but good, dependable guy. If you needed to know something or have something done, you could depend. If Jerry said he would do it, he would do it. Diane Lucci, Diane and I actually knew a little bit about each other before high school. She and I both went to the same church, St. John's Lutheran. She came to high school as a freshman, I believe, having completed 8 years at the Lutheran school. I'd see her at Sunday school and so forth. Occasionally she was up for causing a little ruckus, not just to cause the ruckus, but if she saw something that was wrong, she'd certainly try and make it right, and she made no bones about it.
Ed Cyber, now he was fantastic. He worked for L. Brooks Patterson. Very, very smart person, very studious, good kid.
Edward Cyber, his folks own the cleaning store in town, so he did a lot of work there with his folks and so forth. He still participated in a lot of classroom stuff, after school stuff. Gerald Klemelski, kind of a quiet guy, but again, he was alert of what was going on around him. Good guy to have a conversation with, because he had some depth to his thinking.
Joyce Betcher, one of my best friends. Stood up in her wedding, she stood up in mine. We were good friends. She was very active in cheerleading. I think she was a baton twirler. She was very outgoing.
Joyce Betcher, very nice young lady. She was pleasant to be around and never caused any trouble with amongst her classmates, and just a real nice person. Carol Pirro was a very quiet young lady. Haven't heard or seen what happened to her after school, but I think she'd have been good working with people, because although she was quiet and shy, she certainly would, she'd listen to someone when they're talking to them and really participate in the conversation. She was not self-centered at all, and that she really cared for other people. Leslie Moon, I'm going to have to go back to the 8th grade. I think she was the first girl that we kissed on that spin the bottle hayride deal. It was held at her house, actually. I have her to blame for my 8th grade foray into all kissing as many girls as I get that bottle to stop at. She was a thoughtful person, and again, if she saw a wrong, she would try and right it. Maybe not quite as vocal as Diane Lucci, but Leslie would work to try and make things right with the world and her environment.
John Steyer, brilliant person, very studious, very smart, very intelligent. Went on to be, I believe, an engineer at General Motors, so he was very nice. Friendly, always talked to you.
Mary would be like the female counterpart of Bob Schindler. When she walked into a room, everyone looked to her because they knew she was going to say or do something that was going to be noteworthy, usually on the humorous side. And I don't think she lost that characteristic. At the 20th anniversary of our graduation, she was still cracking jokes, had us all in stitches. Richard Crodell was pretty quiet most of the time, although sometimes he'd get involved in a little scheme of playing a little trick on somebody. So he did have a kind of a dry sense of humor. Larry and I knew each other before the 7th grade, because he and I went to the same church, and I occasionally would spend the night at his house. We did some hanging out in high school in our later years. He also had a nice car, by the way. Everybody seemed to have a nice car but me. Anyway, Larry was a little bit on the, hey, let's try it and see what it's like to do this or that. And sometimes his activities were a little bit adventuresome. Larry
Schultz, another jock, good person, lots of fun, funny. Yeah, he was a clown.
Gerald Buckley always had a grin on his face. He didn't initiate a lot of conversations, but he always had something interesting and fun to say. Nice guy. Loretta Morocco, attractive young lady, married a good friend of my brother's, also a friend of mine, Amos Klotfelder. I did see her once or twice, actually the 20th reunion we had, but great 20th anniversary party, enjoyed it a lot. Linda Lightfoot, actually my memory of Linda goes back to the 7th grade. That's when I went to the bottom of the high school. I thought Linda was kind of attractive, and I was following her around the playground a little bit, and she was calling me a cruddy crud. I wasn't sure it was a good thing or a bad thing at the time. Since that time I've learned I guess it's not that good. John Hornack, or I think now it's called Ian Hornack. Great talent as an artist. He and Jimmy Camley and myself were usually in the top 3 academic-wise, with me being the 3rd. John's talent as an artist is well known. In fact, I've saved a copy of a painting he did for the back of Reader's Digest.
John Hornick, now he was probably one of the smartest kids in our class. I believe he probably was the valedictorian. He's now, I believe he's in New York. He's an artist, changed his name to Ian. Artist, very good, very brilliant person.
Sherry was always older than her classmates as far as activity-wise. Saw her for the first time in 7th grade, and she was taller than most of the boys in the class, and she acted like it. She always acted about 2 years older than the rest of us. Good conversationalist. I remember even the 7th grade talking to her and realizing that I could talk to a female and just talk. Nothing necessarily romantic about it, but a good person to share thoughts with. Richard Miller, his grin kind of says a lot about his personality. Dynamic, fun-loving guy. Would play and like to talk about little harmless pranks, nothing serious, but good guy to have hanging around and have some fun with. Carol was quiet, but a little bit of the devil in her. She would occasionally come up with a one-liner that would get us in stitches about something or somebody. Fun person to have in class.
Carol Sikowski, she was studious as well. She was, quiet and shy.
And Wilbert Williams, he's the last of the 3 musketeers that were usually hanging out together. Fun-loving guy, would often trade jokes back and forth, and he was always pretty astute and up to speed with what was going on.
It was a small school. It was close. I came from a parochial school. I came from St. Peter Lutheran, and it was quite a difference going from a small school and to go to school with kids you didn't know and try and make friends and everything. It was an easy transition, really. Kind of in awe. You walk in and you see all these big people, juniors and seniors, and you're just 8th grade coming into 9th grade. It was nice. It was a good school. Teachers were great. The kids were great. Even underclassmen and the older classmen, they were all, everybody got along.